Semester number 1, lesson number 30. Our aim today is how did Bleeding Kansas and the Dred Scott decision further tension between the North and the South? And to get us started, let's think critically here. What problems could you envision arising from the newly created popular sovereignty that we talked about yesterday? All right. And today we're going to talk about nationalism and sectionalism with focus on the Kansas-Nebraska Act and the Dred Scott decision. So just to start us off with a refresher from yesterday, the Compromise of 1850 had three key provisions. The first is that California enters as a free state, giving the free states one more than the slave states. All right. So in return, the slave states or the southern states get the fugitive slave law, which requires that escaped slaves be returned to their owners. Even if they reach the north and they are found, they are returned to the south, which changes the rule that came before it. And the third, which can go either way, is popular sovereignty. The idea that in these newly created territories that may become slaves, a vote of the people living in the territory would determine whether a territory would be slave or free. And that's what we're going to talk about more today. All right, this concept of popular sovereignty, where it really was a majority vote. The Kansas-Nebraska Act is going to push for this, right? It allowed these territories to decide the question of slavery by popular sovereignty. As these territories are moving towards statehood to try to become states, it has to be decided whether or not they should have slavery. And in order to do that, they are going to use popular sovereignty in both of these. All right, the Kansas-Nebraska Act gives the right for popular sovereignty to be used. So basically a vote happening in each of these territories to say, should there be slavery or should there not be slavery? All right. What they don't anticipate happening, but which does happen, is people flock to Kansas and Nebraska in order to be part of this vote, and in order to get their side, in order to win for their side. So when we talk about Bleeding Kansas, all right, this is the nickname given to the idea when pro and anti-slavery people rush into Kansas to vote on the issue of slavery. All right, there's going to be violence between the two groups. One of the most notorious abolitionists, right? Abolition, remember, is a person who wants to get rid of slavery, right? Was John Brown. All right, and this picture on the right is John Brown fighting in Kansas against slavery. He was a big proponent of abolition, right? Getting rid of slavery, and he felt that slaves should not be treated or that slavery should not exist in the United States. Second thing we're going to talk about is the Dred Scott case in 1857. And you're going to want to put this in your Supreme Court cases in the back of your notebook. This is Dred Scott versus Sanford. This is a Supreme Court case. And this ruling held that no African Americans, slave or free, were citizens. And they were not entitled to the constitutional protection. All right. It declared the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional. What we learned about yesterday, it said the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional. And it said Congress could not deny people of their property or the right to their property. And in this case, we're talking about slaves, by banning slavery in the territories. So this was a huge blow for the abolitionist movement. This was a huge blow for those who wanted to get rid of slavery, because it was our Supreme Court, our highest level of court in the land, saying that slaves had no constitutional protections. They were not protected by the Constitution, and they weren't even people, right? They were, regardless of if they were slave or free, they were not citizens. And those who were slaves were not people, they were property. And because of that, you could not tell someone where they could bring their property. Therefore, the Missouri Compromise, which was agreed upon, was basically null and void, or didn't matter, was useless, because you could not tell a person where they could bring their property. All right. And the whole case behind Dred Scott, or the Dred Scott decision, was Dred Scott was a slave who was brought to the north by his owner Sanford, and he felt that because he was on northern soil, he was free. And this case got all the way to the Supreme Court, but as we saw, they decided that he was not free and was really property, and therefore his owner could take him wherever he wanted. Then we will talk about some of your questions from last night and our check for understanding. How did Bleeding Kansas, the Dred Scott decision, and John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry have similar effects on the United States? A. It ended conflict over slavery and territories. B. It eased tension between the North and the South. C. It contributed to the formation of the Whig Party. Or D. Made sectional compromise more difficult. And we will talk more about that tomorrow. And your classwork is to create your own ruling of the Dred Scott decision. You're going to create a 2-paragraph paper in which paragraph 1 you create your own ruling that is you believe is fair after looking at the South and North's arguments. And in paragraph 2, you discuss what really happened in the Dred Scott versus Sanford case. And we will talk more about this tomorrow. Have a good night, ladies and gentlemen.